The podium floor is yours. We're anxious to hear your presentation about CSR, especially in Canada. Please.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here, and I'm certainly happy to be here. And I'd like to extend a special thank you to Ambassador Chava, who invited me to attend. ERM is here in force. I'm here wearing two hats. I'm an ERM partner, but I'm also a Canadian social performance expert. And so, and it's all about Canada this morning so far, so it's been reassuring. I'm here to talk about social performance, and I'm here to talk about it in the context of a notion or a concept that ERM is developing. It's the mind we want to see. This stems from the PDAC last year, or earlier this year, in fact. One of my colleagues, in fact, the global lead for mining in ERM, was hosting a roundtable with CEOs from major mining, ERM major mining clients. And they're just talking about sustainability in the sector, how to achieve it, some of the issues involved in the sustainability and mining world. And one of the participants mentioned that really what we should all be working for is a mine we all want to see. And we took that kernel of that idea and decided, that's something we can work with. That's an interesting concept. That's something that we should strive to sort of work around and become, to allow that to focus our efforts. And so what is the mine we want to see? I'm going to speak specifically about driving social performance, but I'll quickly introduce. We talk about 5 concepts or 5 notions here. The first being the mine we want to see builds operational excellence. That's about integrating technology and data to reap efficiencies in mining, to cut down on safety incidents, fatalities, and the like. It also fosters holistic water management. My colleague Jane Shaw spoke to that yesterday. That's about recognizing the competing needs of water, both sort of commercial and societal, and having a strategy that addresses that. It's about engaging across the product life cycle. That's about dealing with issues, sort of understanding that the product life cycle from start to finish, from A to Z, is reflected in how we mine. This is about product stewardship, like cobalt initiatives. It's about that kind of challenge in the industry. It also manages closure from the start. It's talking about thinking about closure, not at mine closure, not immediately in advance of, but starting to plan for closure well in advance of the depletion of the resource. And I'll touch on that a little bit as I do the deep dive on driving social performance. Driving social performance is really managing stakeholder relations. It's ensuring that that all stakeholders benefit from mining. And what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides is just about how we can do that. And I give some case examples of how we and some of our other colleagues have worked to drive social performance in the industry. But first of all, a little context. ERM a few years ago commissioned a study, undertook a study of the causes of delay of projects. And as you can see here, most project delays are not the result of technical issues. They're the result of stakeholder issues. Indeed, 42% of large mining projects that face delays did so as a result of stakeholder conflict. That's the result of just not being able to engage properly with communities and allowing risks or stakeholder risks to interrupt project development. 35% were caused by stakeholder or community concerns with environmental issues. So again, we're talking about how you engage with the communities and how that can be addressed so that the project isn't delayed. So, driving social performance. The mine we want to see engages in new kinds of conversations. The current reality is most disclosure programs, and this is not across the board, but too many engagement programs are siloed. They don't have traction within a company. We have a CR team that's working. They're sort of ad hoc, often initiatives. They're not engaging in structured dialogue with communities. They may not document the efforts or the activities they undertake. They have limited internal significance too often. That means you have a CR team and you have the rest of them the mine planning and development team, and they may not interact meaningfully. They may not, the community relations team may not be at the table when mine plan issues are reached. That's a loss, we argue. What this has led to, what we call, is resource localism. That's recognition that resources are local. People are local. People have a sense of place. So and they now, because of this recognition of that, and the recognition, or the access, I should say, to more information, people are demanding more and more. They want to see benefits from projects, and they want to be involved in the planning of a project. So they want a seat at the table, in other words. So what is the opportunity? The opportunity is to formalize, to ramp up engagement activities. That's obvious, that's self-evident. But it's to do it not just to ramp them up, but to do it in a more structured way. I'm going to talk in a minute about an example of such, but it's really getting stakeholders at a table. It's getting stakeholders to help identify issues early on and help plan to overcome these issues. Getting stakeholders or community members to talk about opportunities, not just impacts, and then planning solutions together. So I've got a case study here, an example of a project we're working on. This is not in the region, but it's something we've engaged in Latin America. It's the Mulatos conflict resolution. It's a resettlement. The issues there are, this is a mine community, a community on the fringe of a mine, about 300 meters from a mine area. There was a legacy of bad practice, let's put it that way, not good practice. There had been a failed resettlement in the past. As most of us understand, resettlements are one of the more significant social risks on any project. People tend not to want to be displaced, understandably. If you fail in a resettlement, you can lose the trust of a community in a hurry. So when you try to rebuild trust, or when you try to build trust after a resettlement has failed, it can be a particular challenge. The mine there was referenda being threatened to sort of ban, this is something that I think is familiar in the region, not here in Serbia, but where the referenda to sort of say no more mining, no mining, not in the country itself, but in this particular community. There were 85 open-ended commitments that had been made to the community, sort of a ad hoc basis, none of which had been fulfilled, and with no plan for meeting these commitments or delivering on these promises. So what did we do? Well, what did the company do? The company decided they needed to formalize the engagement process, and they asked us to come in and do that. And what we did was we established a dialogue table, quite literally, a table where all stakeholders could get together, hammer out or flag issues, tease them out, find solutions. So the company was represented there. The community was represented there. Civil society was represented there. We were represented there, not to provide nothing more than technical advice as necessary. Resettlement was the biggest challenge, so we were just trying to help them address sort of some of the resettlement issues that were at play for this. And there was also a chair, an important thing. We had somebody, an independent arbiter, somebody who was able to use a Canadian phrase, to stick handle the discussions, to help navigate the discussions, to set the parameters, to set the rules so that the engagement and the dialogue proceeded more or less according to plan. It has been a success. I won't say that that there's now a happy harmony between the community and the mine and that everything is fine, but they have, and I've used this expression before, they've loosened the Gordian knot, if not untied the Gordian knot. There's a path forward now at that mine for resolving conflict. So it's a success story. Second, and there's 3 of these mine we want to see just to prepare you. The second here is the mine we want to see partners with its communities. Often, and again I caution, not always, but often, a mine is an enclave. It's a fenced compound. It's a fenced, siloed compound. There's little interaction or engagement or link with the community that's hosting it. Employees fly in, fly out at times. Goods fly in, fly out at times, so there's limited local procurement. Infrastructure may be mine dedicated or mine specific, so there's just few linkages between the mine itself and the community. This is often the case in remote locations, and that's where a lot of resources are. So this is, it's not across the board, but it is a common phenomenon, and this can be a huge challenge. So what's the opportunity? The opportunity is to partner with communities, to start thinking regionally, to start thinking about how the company can be not just hosted in that community, but become part of the community, can become a vibrant actor in the community, in the region, to help develop linkages, to help steer the economy, or at least support the economic development, the broader economic development of the region. It's talking about forging linkages internally with the, from internal departments, and I've cited a few here, that can help work with the community, so on hiring practices, on procurement policies, even on security issues. How do you engage, and so that you're not, your security forces are not a threat or a risk, but can work harmoniously with your community. Environmental issues, infrastructure, how your infrastructure can be tied to serve both the mine and the community. I've got an example here too. In fact. This is in Senegal, in Africa. It's a project on a Canadian company, it's all about Canada. A Canadian company acquired a mine in about 2010, I think. It was an existing operation. There were issues. It was an enclave. It was a traditional enclave. The mine was isolated within this rather remote location in Senegal, and the company had interests beyond that. The company had long-term interests in Senegal and had long-term interests in this particular region in Senegal. Not just at this site, but they had land packages throughout the region. So they wanted to make sure they did the right thing. They wanted to make sure they gained their social license to operate, or their partnership, as we heard, another way of describing that yesterday. They were true partners of the community. So what they did, again, it's a table. They established a regional development roundtable, or a regional development group, where they started talking to the community, to the local community, the regional community, other actors, other industries, and other economic actors in the region, and tried to link or tie or harmonize development efforts, to do some land planning together. So here's where we're planning. How can we make sure that our plans don't conflict with your plans? How can we combine efforts so that we minimize impacts and maximize benefits? It too has been a success. It's a regional development strategy. The Teranga Gold Regional Development Strategy, or the Teranga, because it's a broader region now, has had a measure of success, and it has given Teranga Gold, the project proponent there, a position of certain comfort in the region. They are a well-regarded actor in the community, in the region, in the country indeed, because they were seen to be thinking outside the box, to be thinking on the broader context of their activities. I've got another one here to bring it to a Canadian. This is the Thompson Economic Diversification Plan. Thompson, Manitoba is in northern Canada. It's Manitoba's in central Canada. Thompson's in the north of Manitoba. This is a Vale project, so it's not a Canadian company, but Vale is there. They were transitioning their operations from smelting and mining to pure mining, and I may have misstated that. It's not my expertise, but they were downsizing, not closing, but they were downsizing their operations, and they recognized that this would have an impact. That Thompson had been built on the backs of this mine, and as they downsized, there would be significant impacts on the community. So similar to what Teranga had done, they formed the Thompson Economic Development Working Group. Again, a broad suite of actors: Aboriginal communities, industry in the area, the mine, the community, the government of Manitoba, other regions in the area. So you can see here Thompson at the center there, so other smaller communities, and they helped develop Thompson working together into what's called the Hub of the North. So it's a service provider that then provides services to other regions, other communities in the region. The mine still exists, but it no longer underpins everything about the economic well-being of that community. Finally, the mine we want to see manages social closure. You saw one of the 5 pillars of this, the mine we want to see concept or notion is manages closure. I'm going to talk about social closure. Social closure is as important, at least in my estimation, as technical closure or reclamation. But this has really emerged, the current reality has really emerged that stakeholders across the board are starting to recognize, they're starting to demand more. They're expecting something more when a mine closes. They're expecting to be not to be left in the lurch, so to speak, that there's something beyond the mine's life. They want to be engaged in the planning for that early. Too often now, they're not engaged at all, or they're engaged way at the very end of the process, and so it's almost too late. And they want to be involved in the agreements that are reached. They want to help forge the agreements and work towards those agreements. So what we're talking about here is managing it earlier, thinking about closure earlier, thinking about social closure much earlier in the process. Not at the outset, not at exploration, you don't have a project yet, but starting to think it through well before closure, well before you reach that point where the resource is depleted. And to start integrating planning processes, mine planning, mine closure process with the closure plan itself, the social closure plan, so that they're wedded together, and these schedules and these thoughts are considered holistically. I've got an example here. This isn't ours, nothing to do with us. I just find it an interesting example, and it is Canadian, so I thought I'd bring it up. This is the Sun Mine. The Sun Mine was the Sullivan Mine. The Sullivan Mine is a mine, a 100-year mine in British Columbia, Canada. It was, and I'm sure others have a better grasp of the dates, but it was about 1901, I think, that the mine was opened in a tiny little settlement of several hundred people. The settlement became Kimberley, BC, British Columbia, the town of Kimberley, that grew to not a huge town, but grew to, I think, about 7,500 people over the 100-year mine life. Needless to say, and this mine was a significant actor in that economy. It was virtually the only game in town for the longest time. Everything was mine dependent, either direct employment, maybe 1,000 employees, and indirect employment and families. So in a 7,500 person community, you can imagine there wasn't a lot else going on. In the